What's the stupidest thing you've said to a police officer? I learned that if you guess the gender of an androgynous looking officer incorrectly, you don't get away with a warning. Next time I'll go with officer instead of sir. Had something similar happen, but she had an incredibly deep voice for a woman. She drops the sunglasses and says, "What the frick?" Me having an incredibly terrified face on. She just starts laughing. AWW, come on. I can't have a butch voice and not expect people to think I'm a guy. I wiped my brow. The world was an okay place. I got pulled over once for a busted tail light. The cop asked me if there were any drugs or weapons in the car. I said there was a staple gun in my back seat. He asked me what kind of staple gun, and I replied, one that staples. No, the staple gun that shoots lasers. Officer, do you know why I pulled you over? Me. You saw me singing and wanted to know what I was listening to? Officer, glare. Me. Sorry, just kidding. Officer, give me. It was Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. Read that in H. John Benjamin's voice. While being transported from my dorm to the police car for minor consumption, the officer had me by the elbow. I informed him that he wasn't even close to being the prettiest prom date that I've had. Minor consumption makes it sound like you ate a baby. I was pee against a tree, drunk. An officer tapped me on the shoulder and told me to stop. I said, "I'm paying for it anyway, so at least let me finish." Hopefully you didn't turn around to say it. I was traveling in a car with a friend who was driving and not drunk. We got pulled over and the police breathalyzed him. Happy he was under the limit, the cop told us to drive on. I said, "Don't you want to see the body in the boot trunk first?" They made us get out of the car and open the boot. The cop looked pretty disappointed to find it empty. I guess he was hoping for a big career break. In retrospect, it probably wasn't the best thing to say. Joke's on you when your buddy was trafficking drugs that you didn't know about. State trooper pulled me over for speeding. He looked at my license and said, "That don't even look like you." My response? "Doesn't look like you either." The guy was a huge black guy too. 6 feet 6 inches, 270 pounds easily. I don't think he was amused. My buddy told me this story the other day. Him and a couple friends were smoking a joint at a park when the cops rolled up. They were pretty cool, he said. All they did was make them put it out and made them promise to chill until they weren't high anymore. Anyways, the one cop said, "I understand. I smoke every night." Then one of my friends' buddies said, "Wow, are you serious? That's awesome." And the cop said, "No. Are you freaking stupid? I'm a cop. I'm a cop, you idiot." A guy got stabbed at a party I went to, and so I stayed behind to help the host deal with the police. I got taken down to the station drunk and high as all heck. When the cop took me into an office, he gave me a pen and paper and asked for me to tell my story and use the pen pad if needed. I started getting carried away and ended up just drawing a cat in a tree or something like that. The cop just kept laughing as I continued to render out my masterpiece. He then just gave up and decided to just give me a ride home, which was good considering I lived an hour away. While working at a fast food place one time, I had an officer walk up to the counter and say hi. I told him not yet. After he got over the initial shock, he laughed and then would come in often and tell me the latest dirty joke he had just heard. House party getting busted. Dark outside. Me. Are you the sober driver dude cop? No, I am not. I realize he is a cop and start walking away. Meet a girl next to me. Still in earshot of cop. Wait, shouldn't a cop be sober? I was on my way back from picking up 3 dozen donuts for an office party when I got pulled over. The cop looked at the donuts and just said, "That's a lot of donuts." Without thinking, I asked if he wanted some. Turns out he's a fan of Boston creams. I was let off with a warning. I did the same thing but was arrested instead. He made me put my donuts on the hood of his car while he frisked me. I told him if he wanted a donut he could have asked instead of pulling me over. I was immediately cuffed and put in the back of the car and taken to the station. Luckily he was familiar with my family and just called my dad to come get me. Me and my dad had a good laugh. So, last summer I was hanging out with some friends at a fire pit in their backyard in the Chicago. We're drinking and having a good time. I pull out some shrooms that I have been holding onto for a while, eat a bit and pass some around, and all goes well. Later that night I start to leave and go out front to get a taxi. I'm standing on the side of the street and what I think is a taxi pulls up and I hop in the back seat. As I dig in my pocket for some money, I tell the taxi driver, "Hey man, take me to blah blah as fast as you can." I'm tripping balls. About that time I look up and I'm in a freaking cop car with 2 undercover cops. They look back at me and start laughing their asses off. I kind of shrug and join in. They ended up driving me home, all the while having a pretty good conversation about psychedelics. I give them a 10 spot and walk into my house. TL. DRH rooms. Hopped in a cop car instead of cab. Got a ride home for $10. It probably really was a cab. A drunk friend walked up to 2 police officers at a pizza place and said, "Dunkin' Donuts is around the corner." One of the officers responded, "I have diabetes." I was out in the east coast of Canada pretty late at night after coming back from the bar when I heard a clop clop sound behind me. Lo and behold, it was RCMP, Royal Canadian Mounted Police, officer on a horse. As the cop was walking past me, I drunkenly asked him, "So who mounts who?" I am extremely lucky I only spent the night in the drunk tank and not get charged. Not me, but a kid in my town. 14 years old, smoking a cig outside of a store. Cop shows up, pats him down to find the pack and finds a gram of weed. Cop says to the kid, "So, you were going to smoke this?" "And no officer, I wasn't gonna smoke it, I swear. I was gonna sell it." "Well kid, I was going to let you off, but now I have to arrest you." What a freaking dumbass. Not so much said, but did. Gently tossed a wine bottle in their general direction, to which they responded by tasing the crap out of me. Politely hurled. I was at a house party about a month before I turned 21. There were a couple kegs, all sorts of bottles, and tons of underage idiots, men around 18-19. At some point, probably due to our noise, the cops came to the door. We didn't let them in, and figured we would wait them out. They were walking around the house trying to shine their flashlights in the windows. I assumed trying to see someone drinking so that they would have probable cause to come in. At this point I figured we'd either be busted or we wouldn't, so I continued to drink the entire time. After about an hour or so of the standoff, some drunk girl decided to make a run for it. Idiot. The second she opened the door to run away, an officer grabbed her, put her in a car, and then 4 officers all came in. They lined everyone up and asked their age and what they had been drinking that night. Of course everyone said like a beer maybe, and was promptly given an underage ticket. I was at the back of the line, and when I got up to talk to them I decided on honesty. "How old are you?" "3 weeks from 21. "How much have you had to drink?" "Well, I started with a couple shots of vodka, but I've probably had 7 or 8 beers while we were waiting for you guys to come in." The cops laughed, gave me my ad back, and told me not to drive home. Awesome. TLDR. Honesty sometimes pays off. I lived the same story almost exactly to a T. Honesty is a great policy. Officer, have you been drinking tonight, son? Me, no sir. Officer, what's that I smell then? Me, bad breath. I really didn't have anything to drink that night either. Situation, my drunk butt kissing a telephone pole and a cop rolls up. Officer, you know there is a city ordinance against licking telephone poles. Me, officer, there was no tunge. This may possibly be the most concisely elegant post here. Bravo. Any of you lads got a gun? Hold on, I'll check. Anyone brought their gun out? Apparently there had been shootings across the canal we were sat by. Oops. Does the FBI count? If they do, there was this one time an FBI agent came to my home, and as he introduced himself I said, "I hope this is not about the threats I made on Xbox Live," and he just looked at me funny and said, "What kind of threats have you been making?" Overall nothing happened, and he just gave me his card to call him if I ever got in contact with the guy he was looking for. If the FBI starting doing that, I imagine everybody who uses Xbox Live would be in jail. I got stopped outside of a bar and said, "Hey man, I'll plead for the MIP, but please don't write me up for misrepresentation of age." He said, "You misrepresented your age," and wrote me a ticket and took one of my fakes. I once got pulled for having let my registration lapse and the officer was actually very calm and understanding that it had just slipped my mind. Wrote me out a ticket. Told me to get my registration renewed and they'd just drop it. No big deal. If I showed up at open, I'd only lose about half an hour of my day. Then, as he's walking away, he notices the bottle of ginger beer I have in my cup folder. This changes his tone immediately, so he asks, "What is that in your cup folder?" I, with my biggest smile and all of my charm, see this as an opportunity to have a conversation with a cool cop. Scumbag brain kicks in and responds, "Oh, I just really like drinking beer while I'm driving around." I stand by the 2.6 second rule for changing a situation. It took me 5 to realize what I'd said. Happened to us in high school once. My friend gets pulled over on account of us all drinking root beers in the car. The cop seemed disappointed. I was drinking in the streets with a couple of buddies. We just left a party and decided to walk around the neighborhood and finish our beers. Cops came over, made us spill out a beer and made sure we were all 21. They also saw that all of us were drinking and wanted to make sure someone was sober enough to drive, so one of the cops asked who was driving. I responded me and he asks how many beers I've had. I told him just one. He asks whether when I said one I meant a regular beer or something bigger, I think implying a 40 Oz. I said a whole freaking keg. He wasn't amused. The 2 other cops that were with him laughed, but he goes, "Do you want me to take you downtown, smart butt?" We were all told to bring our beers inside and no one got in trouble. I think a lot of people feel an immediate terror, guiltiness, fear around most cops, but if they don't see you as a potential threat, most of them are cool, blue collar working guys. Male straight cops seem to be the majority. They love chicks, jokes, and beer just as much of the rest of us. So if he said that, it's more because you cracked a joke on him in front of his buddies than anything else. While walking out of a bar pants crapping drunk, I noticed a police officer right in front of my cab. I turned to him, tipped an invisible hat at him, and said, "Good evening, constable." He told me I could either go home in this, points to cab, or that, points to squad car. I grinned like an idiot and got in my cab. I once told an officer he was wrong. He then pulled out a giant rule book and read it to me. I ended up being right, but he decided to take my ID and keep it, just in case. I was young and didn't realize how much this doesn't make sense. Somewhere, some old cop has my 16-year-old ID. Dang right he does, using it as his fake kid. Day 1. Got pulled over and ticketed for uninspected vehicle and got bonus ticket for no proof of insurance. 3 months suspension and $500 fine. Day 2. Same cop, same location. I got pulled over again. Second offense on the no insurance is a 6-month suspension and $1,000 fine. The dumb part went like this. Me, "You just gave me 2 tickets yesterday." Him, "I'll give you a ticket every goddamn day." Me, "Well, that solves the freaking problem now, doesn't it?" I was yanked out of the car and screamed at for quite a while for that one. In the end I got the no insurance tickets dismissed. They were because I had not updated my insurance cards because I just switched. Well, that solves the freaking problem now, doesn't it? LOL. I wouldn't have the balls to say this. A story from my mother's youth. She and one of her friends were having a few drinks during the day when they decided to move the party to another friend's house. Even though clearly over the limit, they take the car. Mum's friend is driving. Sure enough, they get pulled over. Not taking it seriously, the friend decided to mess with the cop a little. She opened with "Good affable constanoon" in place of "Good afternoon, constable." He immediately goes to the DUI testing. They had no idea he pulled them over for a brake light and had no intention on testing either of them. I was at a track and field 90s themed party, springtime 2010. My roommate and I had delicately dressed the part, with tube socks, short shorts. I had a pog tube necklace. He had a working pager attached to his jorts and jean jacket. We were very excited about the party, and we had both brought along our rollerblades for any glorious late night adventures. Jump forward 3 hours, my roommate and I are getting the well-deserved attention from our sweet jet-ups. We're fairly hammed and continuing to pound PBRs, and around 12:30 am we brilliantly decide to strap on the blades for a late Night excursion to the local Chinese takeout. We fumble down the back porch, down a long set of stairs, but balancing ourselves like pros, until we reach the pavement. Note, both of us all are double fisting red Solo cups full of booze, and the house is near a very populated, urban downtown area, as the driveway is just feet away from the sidewalk. My roommate and I immediately begin our journey, yet just seconds in, an unmarked cruiser comes flying out of nowhere and blocks our glorious path to drunken freedom and fun fast-paced aerobics. Two detectives exit the vehicle, and one shouts from the passenger side, "What do you young gentlemen have in those cups?" My roommate, a very quip indulgent witty character, unfortunately responded in character, "Dude, it's Serge, want some?" Bad response. The worst part was as he skated over to talk to the detectives, he tripped and spilled his beer all over one of their shoes. We both got cited for drinking in public and our skates were a hazard to us at the moment and were confiscated. Still ended up getting Chinese food. When I was drunk out of my mind. Police, what is your name? Me, I dunno. Police, what is your age? Me, I dunno. Police, are you okay? Me, why? This sounds an awful lot like me. My roommate and I had super glued some dorm room doors shut, including the door of the resident director, after enjoying a night out. Those were the days. Anyhow, while we were sleeping, the police came to the door and ordered us into the hall in our boxes to question us. I asked if my roommate and I could have a moment alone in my room to get our story straight before answering. He responded by handcuffing us. I thought this was a perfectly legitimate question at the time. Moral of the story, don't do stupid things, but if you do, deny. I was 17 and drove intentionally up onto and down the wide sidewalk that was in front of an elementary school by my house with my friend in the passenger seat at around 10 at night. We thought it would be fun, which it was at first. Somehow a cop drives down the road in front of the school, about 30 meters away, and shines his big butt flashlight on the car as I back up off of the sidewalk. He comes to the window and says, "I'll let you give me one excuse as to why you were doing that, and it better be good." I tell him I was just trying to get to school quicker by driving to the front door. Education always comes first. He smirked and told me to go home. Oh holy crap, I've got this one. So, when my father was in college, way back in the day, he had two friends. Together they were Crazy Howard, Crazy Jerry, and Crazy Phil. Howard was the craziest. Now this was in the time when driver's licenses were a large piece of paper and folded in half. Crazy Howard, like many people, kept a $5 bill in the fold as emergency money. This wasn't pocket change back then. Alright, Howard's driving my father somewhere, and to save time on the empty roads, they go the wrong way down a one-way street. Of course, a cop stops them, asks for license, etc. When the cop opens up Howard's license, the $5 falls to the ground, and they must have gotten the only honest cop in the city. He bends down and picks up the bill by the very tip of his fingernails and by the very edge of the note, and he is just shaking with rage. He's waving it in Howard's face, yelling, "What is this? Is this a bribe? Are you trying to buy me off?" Crazy Howard looks him dead in the eye and says, "If it's too much, you can give me change." Driving my friend home from the hospital after a night of heavy drinking. Geez, we were dumb a few years back. I got pulled over literally less than a block after exiting the parking lot. I get a sobriety test, which I don't remember all of, and was told I was borderline too drunk to drive. Cop tells me to walk the rest of the way home and he'll drive my buddy. He's parking my car for me and says, "You know, I only pulled you over because your lights weren't on." I immediately reply with, "Oh man, don't worry about that. I do that all the time. Even when I'm sober." Cop looks at me like he's changed his mind and is going to arrest me and asks pointedly whether I'm sober or not. So I quickly followed up with, "Because, you know, nobody can be completely sober, even after one drink." I got off. Oxford, Ohio cops are so chill. I'm not sure it should be allowed. I live and study in Cork, Ireland. Last year sometime the Queen of England was visiting Ireland for the first time ever. Everyone in Ireland was crapping it that she may be attacked during her visit here by some dissident Republicans. I really didn't have an opinion on her visit and it didn't bother me all that much. Cork is fairly small city, but it is known as the rebel city of Ireland, so the Irish Gardaí, police, had really put up their numbers in my city. It was a tad annoying because we weren't allowed go down certain streets and the police were being real pricks to the locals and just basically telling us to frick off home. Anyway, the night before her arrival my friends and I decided to go on real big drinking session. We got absolutely hammered. After all our drinking we were wandering home and we kept getting stopped and asked questions by the police. They wouldn't let us go the usual way home, and there was one policeman on a bike who had obviously been shipped in from another city in Ireland and he didn't know his way around our city. He was being a real Cetus and I basically shouted at him, since when did the Gardaí become fascist pricks? Needless to say he wasn't best impressed. To our luck he didn't know our city as well as we did and we were able to make a quick getaway through some back streets. When I woke up in the morning I felt very bad because the poor man was just trying to do his job, but in our defense they were very handed toward us over a situation we couldn't control. Oh man. Back in January, Lights was just playing a show on our campus. I got really hammered before going, and the bouncers ended up kicking me out during the opening act. I could barely stand. So after getting kicked out, I started peeing on the side of the building just as a pair of campus cops rolled up. They basically said, really? The SLC, Student Life Center, is like a minute walk away, and you're peeing in public right in front of us. Being drunk as heck, and feeling a bit chummy, I decided it would be a good idea to slur out, "I'm sorry guys, I don't really have an excuse. Hey, do you guys wanna come drink some bourbon with me? I got a fresh bottle of Maker's Mark. We should go back to my place at, address redacted, and drink it." They seemed like they were kind of both facepiming and chuckling, and luckily during the exchange a friend found me and said he would take me home. The cops just said, "Okay, go home now, but if we come back later and you're still here, we're going to have to give you a ticket." I'm a lucky man indeed. Thanks, chill cops. I personally did not say this to the officer and the idiot did not get away with it. However, I was the only other passenger in the vehicle when it occurred and felt compelled to share this. I was working on a project in the late 90s upgrading a pharmacy chain's point of sale systems and pharmacy servers. We were sent to Atlanta, Georgia, and while driving from our hotel to one of the sites, my partner got pulled over for doing 95 miles per hour in a 55 mile per hour zone. The guy was a bit of a smart butt. Okay, a huge smart butt. And I pleaded with him to not give the cop any crap. I tried to explain to him that cops in the South generally don't give any breaks to people from the North and it would behoove him to not be an butt. The cop was your prototypical TV cop from the South. Round hat, mirrored glasses, big wad of chew in his mouth. You get the idea. He was less than cordial and said, "License and registration boy." My co-worker started going on about how he was a man and that he would oblige the officer by offering his genitals for inspection. The officer replied, "Very cute boy, license and registration." Some banter back and forth ensued and finally, he gave the officer his license and the rental agreement for the car we were in. The officer thanked him and said he'd be right back with his ticket. I made another plea to my co-worker's remaining good senses, asking him to just say thank you so we can get on with the day. The officer returned with the ticket and said, "Here you go boy, this here is a ticket for $500 and remember this, nobody, but nobody drives through my great state of Georgia that dang fast, without missing a beat." The idiot says, "General Sherman did." The officer unfastened the button on his sidearm and told him to get out of the car. The officer verified that I had a valid license to operate a motor vehicle, instructed me to continue with my business, and gave me the address of where I could pick up my friend the next day. Not only was this guy arrested, upon informing my office of why he could not make it to work, I tried to cover for him. He lost his job. To make matters worse, they ran this guy through the ringer at the police station, which included a strip search with a full body cavity inspection. TLDR. A guy I worked with mouthed off to a Georgia state trooper, got arrested, had his exit inspected while in jail, and lost his job all in the same day. Georgia HP pulled me over for speeding, stops at the rear and reads my USMC bumper stickers, takes my ID and paperwork, returns and hands me the ticket and says to me, "Should have joined the Navy." A few years ago the police showed up at my high school because someone had found a bag with a white powder in the cafeteria. As the police officer gets back in his car with the bag, I walk by him and say, "That's baking powder, not C. I don't think snorting it is gonna do you much, but whatever floats your boat, mate." I got caught underage drinking and they were gonna send a letter home. I gave them a fake name, which at the time seemed foolproof. My downfall was that I gave them my real address. I then proceeded to ask for a lift to the train station, at which point they told me they weren't a taxi service. I got pulled over in my '63 Ford Fairlane that was burning oil. I got pulled over into the police academy training facility. When the officer asked me why my car was smoking, I told him that it needed a rim job. I meant ring job. He just looked at me and nodded. I went to a fairly rural college, and students would frequently drive 5 miles down the road to Sheetz, basically Wawa, as it was the closest thing to campus. I was going to pick up snacks around 2 AM one weekend when I got pulled over. The officer said I had been swerving over the center line. I probably had been, but it was the middle of the night, winding country roads, perfect visibility, and there was no other traffic. He asked if I had been drinking, and I said no. That's just how I drive. There was a similar situation a few years later. I had an apartment with street parking and would make a U-turn every morning to head to work. One day I was pulled over, and I almost said I thought it was allowed. I do this every day. Both times I got off with a warning. Calling Sheetz basically a Wawa is like calling a turd basically a Snickers bar. Sheetz is complete butt, but Wawa on the other hand is sweet hunger fulfilling bliss. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.